I wasn't always prepared mentally and emotionally to be involved in this kind of thing. I had to get ready. I didn't know at the time that's what I was doing. What I knew was that my life was screwed up. It was not working. And I had to change something. Well, the first temptation is always change someone else, right? And when I worked 25 years as a therapist, almost everyone who came through my door basically came into therapy hoping to change someone else. Their husband, their child, their parent, their boss, their, you name it. Okay, they want to change someone else. Well, guess what? You can't change someone else. Ever. It's impossible. What you can do is change yourself. How do you do that? And so, in order to answer that question, I got into therapy, and I was in therapy for 10 years. And I worked at it really hard because I was really screwed up and I really needed it. Totally transformed my life, and in many ways transformed me. So, in the process of doing that, I realized this is a really good thing. I want to share it with other people. Hey, here's a way I can actually live my life seeing people benefit from what I do. Make sense? Well, there's skills. Now, something I need to tell you. The best skills in this field are not found in schools, in universities, in academia. Sorry, those are controlled by cartels. I'm not going to get into what is a cartel, how does it operate, and so on. But cartels are not a good thing. Cartels are shared monopolies that control an industry for their own benefit, not for anyone else, not for the customers in that industry, not for the general public. And cartels always make agreements with governments because the governments will enforce their rules and limit their competition. Well, there are cartels that control psychiatry, psychology, social work, any so-called profession where people have licenses. Guess what? It's run by a cartel. Every single one. They're all cartels. And they don't care about you or me, but they say they do. We're protecting the public from unscrupulous practitioners. Bah! Humbug! Angie's List does that better. Huh? We don't need government for that function. It's just their way of getting their hand deeper in our pockets and screwing with us. They like doing that. They got nothing better to do. They're not creative. They are parasites. Okay, so anyway, so I was exposed to and learned a number of disciplines, if you will, for changing our experience of being in the world. The first one I'll mention is called cognitive therapy. And this one they do teach in schools. Okay? Cognitive therapy and behavioral therapy, which is supposed to change people's behavior, these are the least effective means of doing therapy. But they're practically the only thing taught in schools. Oh. Well, out on the fringes, outside the schools, outside the box, there are people experimenting with things that are not approved by the universities. And by golly, over the years, we've found a lot of stuff that works, that transforms people's lives. Most of it, they don't even know about in the schools. And if they do know about it, oh, that's an alternative therapy. They'll sneer at it, right? Turn their nose up at it.
Well, these days, even eating healthy is looked at as an alternative therapy.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, they'll either call it alternative or something comparable. They mean it pejoratively, it's a put down. Okay, this is what they do, and a little bit of what you can do with cognitive therapy trickles into the subconscious where the decisions actually get made. But it's not very effective. Okay, so the next one I learned was called Gestalt therapy. This was invented by Fritz Pearls. Have any of you heard of him? This was back in the 40s and 50s. he came up with a way to interact with the client such that the client learns more and more about themselves on a deep emotional level. And given time, we might even have some tonight, I can demonstrate how this is done. There's a whole set of principles goes with it. That is fun to do as a therapist. As the client, it can be an ordeal. I've been the client. I know some of the ordeals. One of the things I did with Gestalt therapy is I recover, you know, when you do therapy, you often recover ancient memories that you forgot you had. When I did Gestalt one time, I remembered being circumcised. I was 8 days old. I was still in the hospital where I'd been born. 8 days old. I remembered vividly and have since then verified that my memory actually stacks up to the way it's done in hospitals. It was awful because an infant does not localize pain. You scratch the finger of an infant, it feels like it's the whole body being scratched. Unlocalized. Torture. Okay, Gestalt therapy, very powerful. Then there's a thing called bioenergetic therapy. Bioenergetic therapy starts with the premise that the body, the human body, is a manifestation of energy. And how we relate to the world, how we talk to people, how we interact with people, how we present ourselves, the secrets that we keep to ourselves, this is all functions of flow of energy in the body. Now, when I first went into therapy, watch me closely. Look at me. You all right? Mm-hmm. Look at my shoulders. When I went into therapy, my shoulders were like this. I thought I was relaxed. Boy, it hurts just to do that now. But I used to go around like this, and I'd sit down, I'd be relaxed, you know. And somebody would say to me, Podolsky, are you angry? Well, you see, I grew up in a family where anger and fear were forbidden. Not allowed to be angry. Got to be reasonable. Oh, I'm not angry, I'm reasonable. I didn't know I was lying. So I did some of the exercises. These are physical exercises, which included all kinds of stretching and bending and breathing certain ways and lying on my back over a stool that was about this high, arched over like this, and pounding on cushions with my fists, pretending to be angry, right? Well, one day I did that, and it practically took over me, because I really was angry, but I didn't know it until it started emerging with the exercises bring out the feelings. Here's a guy who had lived practically without feelings, and suddenly I'm having a lot of them. It felt good. Woo! Changed me. My shoulders came down. The body changed. My dynamics with people changed. If somebody asks me if I'm angry now, I stop and think about it. And I go inside and feel. Yeah, I guess I am angry about something. Or not. But at least I know where to go to find the feeling. Because before that therapy, I didn't know where to go to find the feeling. Someone would say, are you angry? No, not me. Reasonable. I'm so into being reasonable. Okay. Then there's a thing called strategic therapy. Jay Haley invented that. By the way, bioenergetics was invented by Alexander Lowen, L-O-W-E-N, bioenergetics. He was a student of Wilhelm Reich, who was a student of Freud. Bright guys. One of the things that came out of this bioenergetic therapy, I'm backing up a step here, is a thing called characterology. And that's something you might be interested in learning. Characterology. It's the study of what we do to ourselves to keep from knowing who we really are. as infants and toddlers, all of us in our society are subjected to certain kinds of stresses and traumas that are not good for us. But our parents at that age are ignorant, they don't know, they do the wrong thing. We get stressed, we get traumatized, and then we don't want to admit that to the world, especially living under those parents. So we lie to ourselves about who we are, and we grow our bodies to defend that, to pretend to be other than we really are. That thing we do to ourselves, and it affects our attitudes, our emotions, our illusions about the world and about ourselves, a whole panoply of stuff goes into it in the characterology. It's called character structure. So when people are miserable and neurotic, as I was a youngster, the enemy isn't the parents, it isn't the society, it's your own character structure. And with effort, one can change character structure, although back in Freud's day, they didn't believe that. It turns out you can. Strategic therapy, on the other hand, this has to do with the interplay between a therapist and a client. And usually what happens, especially with the cognitive therapy up here and behavioral therapy, the therapist attempts to manipulate the client into behaving differently for their own good. Well, the client will always resist. So what this method teaches, and it's really quite a simple strategy, is what is called the therapeutic double bind. Double bind. What do I mean by that? Well, for instance, supposing someone comes in to see me and they're really overweight and they want to lose weight, but it seems impossible. So I might say to them, okay, I'll give you an assignment. I'm going to see you next week. This week I want you to gain 3 pounds. You're going to go, what? Gain 3 pounds? I want to lose weight, I don't want to gain weight. Come on, Podolsky. No, that's what I want you to do. You want to lose weight, this week you got to gain 3 pounds. Now, they have 2 choices. Number 1, they obey. And they gain 3 pounds. But now they're getting in the habit of doing what I tell them to do. I'm taking charge of their behavior. Right, that could be a good thing. Or 2, they disobey and they lose 3 pounds. Well, now they're getting the result they wanted. Guess what? I put them in a therapeutic double bind. Whichever way they go, they're going to get better. What do you think of that? That's the strategic therapy. Jay Haley. Okay, I got 2 more to go. See, I learned how to do these things, and then I practiced combining them, using them simultaneously. Oh, I don't know anyone else that's ever done that, but it worked for me and for my clients. Okay, next we have a thing called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which I'll just abbreviate NLP. My first introduction to NLP was a talk that was given by Tony Robbins in the early days of his career before he was rich and famous. He came to Eugene, Oregon, where I was living, and he gave a talk promoting a training program to be given by John Grinder, who is one of the co-inventors of neuro-linguistic programming. And I was impressed. This is some good technology. I'll tell you a little about it today. This is where we're getting into what I want to really talk about today. Neuro-linguistic programming. Well, John Grinder is a linguist. A really, really good one. I mean, he's amazing. And he noticed certain patterns of behavior that when people communicate, they're doing things they don't know they're doing. that can be noticed and responded to. He also recognized some really fundamental principles, like the fact that a lot of our behavior is wired into us. It's like conditioned reflexes. And we can change them, we can take charge of them. A number of things, but I'll come back to the details here, but the main thing here is this works directly on the subconscious. All your important decisions are made at the subconscious level. All of them. Then you rationalize them. You say, I did that because blah, 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 blah. You give yourself a reason, which may be a good reason, maybe not a good reason, but the fact is you made the decision before you had the reason. It was made subconsciously. That's where the real action happens. That's where I always did my work when I was working as a therapist, at that level. Okay? Because this cognitive stuff that's up here, talky talk, rarely trickles down into the subconscious. To the extent that the cognitive therapy works at all, it works because a little bit of it gets into the subconscious. This approaches the subconscious directly. I'm prepared to demonstrate that. Okay, neuro-linguistic programming. Now, how did John Grinder and his partner Richard Bandler discover these principles? They studied the work of 3 famous therapists. Okay? They studied Virginia Satir. She was famous for the work she did with couples. Worked really well with couples. Because oftentimes couples don't realize it. They're talking different languages to each other. And that's why a lot of confusion results. They're literally using different vocabulary, a different language. Okay, they also studied the work of Fritz Pearls. Now, Fritz Pearls is the guy that invented this Gestalt therapy. And that is a very effective therapy. And they also studied the work of Milton Erickson. E-R-I-C-K-S-O-N. Milton Erickson. He was the inventor of modern hypnosis. He was a brilliant psychiatrist. No one has been able to duplicate the amazing things he accomplished using his hypnotic techniques. Now, that's the last of this list here is Ericksonian hypnosis. Ericksonian hypnosis. And it's one of the things that I mastered in learning how to be a good therapist. But it is based on the behavior of these 3 therapists. They have certain things they all 3 did, even though their styles are completely different. You wouldn't watching Fritz Pearls, you wouldn't imagine he's doing some of the same things Milton Erickson did when he hypnotized people. You wouldn't know it, unless you were a very skilled neuro-linguistics expert like John Grinder, and they recognized it. This requires all of the skills and knowledge that it takes to do NLP and more. So when I teach this stuff, I teach the NLP first, and then advanced techniques to the Ericksonian hypnosis. I got to tell you, you do not have to go to school to learn this stuff. You do not have to have degrees in it to be able to do it. You do not have to be a PhD licensed blah 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 to be effective in changing the lives of people who want their lives changed. All you need to do is have the skills and find the people. Okay, any questions on what I've covered so far? You understand that what I'm telling you is that people who want to change the world, make it a better place to live, do octalogs, and holomats, and change the structure of society, some of those people are going to have to be in touch with who they really are. Okay? The best, if you were shopping for a therapist, the absolutely most essential characteristic, quality, defining criteria for a good therapist is that they've had a lot of therapy. They know themselves to the bone. Why is that important? Well, they're going to lead you to parts of your own psyche that you'd rather not visit. How can they do that if they're afraid to go to that place of themselves? They won't. They can't. So for them to have the confidence to take you where you really need to go, to find out things you really don't want to know, but need to know, they better know themselves to the bone. Okay, so that's the number one characteristic of a really good therapist. Whenever people ask me, well, how do I go find a therapist? Well, I can list these skills and say, you know, they better have 2 or 3 of those. But even more important is that they've done a lot of work on themselves. I remember everything. I remember being born. I remember being in the cradle. I remember being in nursery school. Everything. I didn't always remember those things. Most of them I didn't know when I went into therapy. But through the therapy, this stuff comes back. You recover your memories. Okay. Questions? Interesting?
No, I'm just remembering things that I'm more all the time. Yeah.
Yes. As we get older, we do have a spontaneous tendency to lower our inner guard and get closer to who we really are. We've got less to lose. And we've been safe for a long time, and we're comfortable with ourselves. It's one of the advantages of age. It's a good thing there's some. Okay. I hope you're seeing the relevance of these different things I'm talking about, because my scope of interest goes all the way from these very high level stuff about how society is organized, down to this very deep mystical stuff about who we are, how our brains work, how we hide from ourselves, how we get over that, and so on, and everything in between. You know, science, technology, math, science, I'm interested in a lot of stuff. But I'm trying to bring together here, in a matter of a very short time, some of the crucial ideas that you can apply. Everyone can apply. I don't care what your age is. I don't care whether you're male or female, you're rich, you're poor. Everyone can benefit from this stuff. And I want to get everyone to know about it. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about NLP in more detail, so you have some sense of what it is and what it's capable of. And who knows, you might decide you want to learn how to do it. Okay. Let's suppose that this box, this rectangle, represents, in some way, reality. In fact, I'm going to make it 3-dimensional like that. There's reality. Reality. And over here, in your head, somewhere over here in your head, that's a very poor profile. In fact, I know I can improve on that a little bit. Okay. We have senses, okay? You see, you hear, and you feel. And by feel, I'm talking about what you do with your hands and the rest of your body, where you actually come in contact with the world and sense the world, okay? So you got all this input. What happens to it? Does it tell you what reality is? Not really. Well, first of all, it gets filtered. Up here in the front part of your brain, there's a section that's a filter. The fact is, you've got so much data coming in that if you didn't filter it, you'd be overwhelmed by it. I mean, what's the benefit of, while you're listening to me, you're also listening to that cricket out there that's going chirp, 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 chirp. It's a distraction. You don't need to hear that. You don't need to hear the sound of my breathing at the moment. But if you didn't filter any of it out, it would all have equal weight. In order to focus on something and distinguish it from the background, you've got to filter out the background. So it goes through a filter. Wow, there's a lot of distortion goes on in that. And then it gets into a part of the brain that does the interpreting of the data. And guess what? You create an internal image or map of what's out there. Right? That's why I did the big box there and the little one here. Now comes the interesting part. The map is not the territory. And you don't get to actually interact with the territory at all. You're interacting always with the map through your senses. That's profound. The map is not the territory. Your internal representation of the universe you live in is all in your head. There's none of it that's out there somewhere. It's in you. And you can change it. You can manipulate it. You can improve it. Or you can make it worse. It's up to you. You have to know how to do it. But what I'm telling you is that you can change your map of the world and thereby change your experience. Wow! There's so much power in that. Can you see that? I mean, it's a kind of a abstract concept, but when I first heard that, I heard Tony Robbins get up and say, the map is not the territory. I had to think about it. It wasn't immediately obvious, but he was right. Now that I understand it and have absorbed it into my awareness and my mentality, it's very powerful and helpful to know that. Well, what is real for the individual? Well, you have visual data. This is what you see and remember of what you've seen. You have auditory data. It's what you hear, what you've heard. And kinesthetic. Data. That has to do with what you touch, what you smell, that's a form of touch, what you taste, the position of your body, your balance and all of that, your internal mechanism for keeping your balance. VAK, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Comes up again and again and again in the Neurolinguistics. Okay. So now I'm going to give you an example of how one can recognize. It's easiest to learn this stuff if you first apply it to others and then to yourself. You could apply it right to yourself, but we all have preferences about whether we process information visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically. For instance, how about a person who gets up in front of you like this and says, now you need to see this. I'm not painting a pretty picture here, but do you see what I mean? Is that coming through nice and clear? Notice my vocabulary is all about seeing. And I'm sitting up, talking quickly, eyes wide open, focused on what I see. Okay? Now, someone else in the same setting is going to go, well, let me tell you. Okay, I can hear what you're saying. It rings my bell, and sounds right to me. Notice I'm using language that's all about the auditory dimension. And my speech is different. I'm more rhythmic, my voice goes up and down. I'm doing the auditory language. Or, I'll have to sit for this one. Yes, I know how it feels to be relaxed, to be at ease. And when you present a problem, I grasp it right away. I get the feel of that. Notice my posture is different, my tone of voice is different, and I'm using language that describes physical feeling stuff, kinesthetic language. Okay? From now on, from tonight on, when you go out and listen to people talking, you will often recognize they're in one of these modes. Now we have some flexibility to move from one to another, as you just saw me do. But I'm telling you, if I want to communicate face-to-face with another person, I'm going to mirror their type of speech. That's a visual reference, by the way. I am going to reflect back to them what they are doing. And if they're talking visually, I will respond visually. And if they're talking auditorily, hey, I remember when I was a kid, there was this program on the radio. There was this guy who said, this is Bud Scruggs, the man with plugs. I'm back on the scene with my record machine. He was a DJ, right? Auditory, typical. And by the way, when people sit like this, you know they're listening. That's the telephone position.
You're listening. I'm listening.
We do go back and forth between these. And a good communicator can lead people from one to another. When I come into a room, everyone's in a different mode, according to their preferences. But now everyone's in the same mode in this room, because I've led you into that. So there are speech-giving platform skills that you can learn based on this stuff. Wow. Powerful. What else? Well, when someone is in a visual mode, you can tell from their eye movements. Ooh. Let's say these are the eyes, and someone is remembering a visual experience. Their eyes are going to look like this. They're going to look up and to the left, if they are normally right-handed organized. Some people are reversed. You got to calibrate them. But my point is that every time you remember something visual, if you are, like most people, you're going to look up and to the left. So if you're watching my eyes and you ask me a question like, what color was your bedroom when you were 6? I'll say, well, let's see. I'll give you the answer. Well, the real answer I wanted is, how do you move your eyes when you think about visual stuff, memory, and you'll demonstrate it before you ever say a word. Well, what if the memory isn't, what if the thing you're going to tell me isn't a memory? What if you're going to lie to me, make something up? Oh, it wasn't green, it was blue. Okay. Then your eyes go up and to the right. When you are imagining something contrary to your experience, the eyes go up and to the right. Guess how many lies you could detect with that?
Yeah.
Ooh. Similarly, and I'm not going to make diagrams for all of these, when you're talking to when you're accessing auditory memory, you'll tend to look to the left. Auditory made up, you're pretending what someone said to you, you look to the right. Mind you, some people are reversed. You need to calibrate them before you know for sure. If you access feelings, do you remember how you felt on your 5th birthday when you blah, 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 blah? And people go like this. I'm waiting. People will go down and to the right. And if they go down and to the left, they're having a conversation with themselves. Self-talk. Okay? So I can ask a series of questions of someone and they won't say a word, but I can tell what their process is. This is very valuable in sales, by the way, for advanced sales technique. Because we have a thing called a decision pattern. To make an important decision, there are a series of these steps you'll usually go through to make a decision. For instance, if I say, how do you decide whether or not to buy a car? How do you make the decision? The person will frequently do something like this. Watch me closely. Well, then they'll give me an answer. But they've told me what I want to know. They make a picture, they have a feeling about it, they remember hearing something that is relevant to the decision, and then they talk to themselves about it. So I might then say to them, can you see yourself feeling really good about this car? And hearing your parents, your wife get excited about it, and then you can say to yourself, wow, I did the right thing when I bought the car. That's a close, but it's a sophisticated close because it matches their decision-making process. Wow. So, you can use it in many different kinds of communication. Now, there's some other things with NLP. There's a thing called an anchor. And by the way, I'm prepared to teach all of you how to do all these things. You'll have to decide what you want to learn, or do you want to learn, if anything. But I'm looking to get people interested in learning all this stuff, top to bottom, from the octalogs to the deep subconscious, even the mystical stuff down there. Okay. There's another thing, it's called an anchor. This is a one experience learning. Okay, it's like, you know about Pavlov, who he'd feed the dog and ring a bell, and the dog would salivate. And then he would ring a bell without any food there, and the dog would salivate. Then he'd sound a buzzer and ring a bell, and the dog would salivate, and after a while, the dog would salivate when he sounds the buzzer. And there's no bell, and there's no food, but the dog's salivating anyway. Humans are just like that. We do the same kind of thing all the time. Yeah, it's very amazing. I get amused by it all the time. We do the same kind of stuff and don't realize it most of the time. But we can find those things in our behavior and make use of them. For instance, let's say you hate giving speeches. You hate getting up in front of a group and talking. I don't know if any of you feel that way, but a lot of people do. They have a phobia of it even. Well, short of it being a phobia, it could be just distasteful to them. Well, how can they get over that? Well, what I would have to do, among other things, is I'd say, okay, show me how you feel when you get up in front of the group and you're really nervous. Get up here, get in that position. And when they're actually there at the peak of that nervousness, I'll do something. Depending on whether they're in visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, I may grab their shoulder, or their arm, or their hand, or an elbow, so I'm giving them a kinesthetic cue. I'll also say something. I'll give them an auditory cue. And I may make a gesture as a visual cue. And they will match that up with that feeling of nervousness. And then later on, I have them get out of state. In other words, I have them jump around. You know, they're no longer in a nervous state. And I'll come along, grab hold of the arm, make the gesture, say the word or the sound, and suddenly they're nervous again. Puts them right back in. It's called an anchor. Now that's a negative kind of anchor. But I want to see how deeply connected to that dynamic they are. So I let them demonstrate it. Then I do the opposite. I say, hey, what are you really good at? What are you successful at? What is something you enjoy doing? Oh, I like playing tennis. Well, get up here and show me what you look like when you're playing tennis. Ah, boom, boom, boom. And they get up and they get into their tennis state. And they're having fun. And again, I'll anchor it, but with a different gesture, different touch, different tone of voice, because I don't want to get too confused. And suddenly, they're in this resourceful state, and I've anchored it. Now, what do you think happens if I fire both anchors at the same time?
They explode.
What happens is that that resourceful state wipes out some of the nervous state. And then they can get up in front of a group and talk and be comfortable. Well, what do you know? All done with anchors. Nice thing with anchors is I can pile an anchor on top of another anchor using the same, whatever it is I'm using to anchor that. Right now I'm anchoring some of the things I'm saying with my tone of voice and my gestures and my eye contact. These are anchors. Okay? I have friends who don't know why it is, but every time we shake hands they break out in a big grin. Because I happened to shake their hand one time when they were in a big grin, and it's worked every time since. Okay? So anyway, you can develop resource states. So let's take the case of the tennis player. He's got a tennis playing resource state. Well, maybe he's got some other resource states. How about when he's on a date and the girl's really pretty and he's feeling excited and he's in this state where he's ready to see something happen? I'll anchor it with the same anchor that I use for tennis. And maybe another one, he has a success in business. He makes a big killing or he makes a big sale or something. And I can anchor it using the same anchor. Because now I'm taking the tennis resource and the seductive resource, if you will, and another and another and another, and piling them up on top of each other. And now when I fire that anchor with a gesture, a word, a tone of voice, guess what happens? Well, no, he's not doing tennis lying in bed with the girl. No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is he feels really resourceful, confident, capable. Where when I met him, he might not have seemed to have any of those things. That's another thing you can do with NLP, resource states. And I'll tell you, for people who are caregivers, who are taking care of someone that's a pain in the ass at times and difficult to deal with, this is wonderful to have some resource states. It really helps. That's how I got through it when I went through it. You know, for those of you in the back, I don't know if you know, my wife had Alzheimer's and I took care of her for 10 years. And I survived it because I was doing this stuff for myself. How about that? Once you learn how to do it, you can do it for yourself. Don't need to have some practitioner there doing it with you all the time. How about that? Any questions on what I've just gone through? Okay, let's take it a step further. How'd you like to have a conversation with your own subconscious? Woo, wouldn't that be interesting? Hey, little fella.
Depends.
The fact is, since all the really big decisions are made at that subconscious level, it behooves me to build some rapport between the conscious me and the subconscious me. And I can do that. And I can teach you to do it.